Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We have Lisa rejoining us. Good to see you. Brian, new face. Very pumped to talk to you as well. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Hit the buttons, like, subscribe, notify yourself. That way you get your emails every morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. And it feels like it's getting earlier and earlier in my mind, but it's actually not. It could just be the fact that I need to go to bed sooner. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly throughout the show. Other than that, I am very excited. Let's get some intros. So, Brian, I'm going to start with you. 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where do you come from? All that good stuff. Giver.
Yeah, Brian Churchill. I'm coming from LA. I'm LAPD. Spent my time also in the Coast Guard and a little bit of time in the Army, and just happy to be here.
Outstanding. We're happy to have you. Lisa, how about yourself? 10 to 15 seconds.
All right,
Go.
Lisa Jaster, author of the book Delete the Adjective. I am currently an Army reservist, and I also do, let's say, leadership development. Is that close enough?
I like it. That was good. It was under 10 seconds. She's getting fast. It's almost like she's done this before, perhaps. Well, we're excited to get this show going. Now, I've been searching this morning for some way to enter into this conversation, some sort of definition, some sort of quote, but I haven't been able to figure it out. So I'm just going to explain what my thoughts were, and then we'll get your guys' thoughts on it, and then we'll let the conversation go from there. So today we are going to be talking about life beyond service. And this is one of the mistakes that I made while I was in, was I let the uniform define me. And I was the soldier. The soldier was me. I didn't have any differentiation between that. I would wake up in the morning, as I was telling Brian a second ago, I'd wake up like 5 minutes before PT, show up, do PT, start my day that way. And there was nothing beyond that. There was nothing outside of that that I used to keep myself busy. All of my friends were in the military, all that stuff. So I'm wondering if you guys have experienced the same. Brian, especially you've had 3 different uniform service now, so I'm wondering if you've figured out any lessons on that. But let's go around the table, I guess, and see how we feel about it. Brian, let's start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that all of us are the uniform for a long time, and one of my other jobs, I'm on the pension commission for the police and fire here in Los Angeles, and you worry a lot about retirees when they leave that uniform, and what do they do? And I think it's tough, and it's tough for me. I mean, look, I bleed blue. I'm LAPD, and that's one of the proudest things that I could say. Same thing with the Coast Guard and the Army. It's hard to leave the uniform, but I think that all of our personalities, when we serve in uniform, we just have to find other ways to serve afterward, and how to keep going forward and keep providing purpose and service. So that when I look at people that are successful after the uniform, there's still that sense of purpose. There's still what drove them when they're in uniform that drives them out of uniform. So just making that transition, I think, is difficult. And I worry for me, I'm going to be transitioning in about a decade, probably out of the LAPD. But I've got a few fires going outside the uniform that kind of keep me grounded. So I think I can kick it back to you, and we can talk about that more if you'd like.
I like it. No, let's carry on here. Lisa, what about yourself? First thoughts on life beyond service?
So for me, it was really hard because after 7 years of active service, 2 years in South Korea, and 2 deployments, Afghanistan and Iraq, when I got out, I lost everything. I lost all my friends. I didn't realize that corporate America doesn't care about you after you leave the office. I'm sure the first responders are different because you hold each other's lives in your hands. You end up knowing your family. But I worked with people for years and didn't know if they were married, if they had kids, anything about them, because you don't bring your whole life to the office when you're an engineer. But when you're a soldier, like you were talking about PT, you're there at 6:30 in the morning. Like you're still all running to the bathroom because your coffee just kicked in. And it's funny, and you communicate, and it's not embarrassing. In corporate America, you're like, ooh, where's that, the private stall? it's just, you know, it's a different world. You don't share everything. So I wanted to talk real quick about something Brian was saying with regards to the transition, and I'm going to do a really, really shameless plug here, and hopefully that's okay with you. But I am on the board of advisors of an organization called Team Red, White, and Blue. And I will say that Team RWB has helped me and my husband and I transition very well from the military into civilian life. But it also helps a lot of veterans. And it's one of the few veterans organizations that's focused on fitness and activities instead of, hey, let's go get drunk and shoot skeet. And I say that a little bit of tongue in cheek, but a lot of veterans organizations, that's what we end up doing. We end up something with alcohol. So, you know, they sponsored me to shoot in the tactical games last weekend. And it's an organization where I'm just constantly surrounded not only by veterans, but veteran supporters. So it became that community that cared about me after 5 p.m. So that's my shameless plug for transitioning.
It's all good. There are lots of programs out there, I think, now. But I mean, you think back. I'm thinking back to when Shaun got out. Shaun, do you have any? See if he can actually hear us because he turned his camera off. But do you have any thoughts on when you got out?
I can
There
hear you.
weren't any programs at all, right?
So I'm going to leave my camera off with the hopes that I'll have some bandwidth. It feels like I'm talking to you through a soup can right now. So I think that back in the day, there was very little to nothing for transitioning process. And so the life beyond service was really flip a coin and see where it lands. I kind of cobbled my way out of the military in my own way, but now I feel that it's much more organized with perhaps a larger body of veterans who are better established or have a better understanding of how to do this well. And so I think there's a bit of a beacon of light out there, or a lighthouse of excellence that can easily be identified that you can pursue for betterment now versus in my day. So the life beyond service sometimes gets a little bit of a gloomy pitch thrown at it. And I think that it's a lot more positive than most people would realize if they contextualize it against back in the day where people were still seeing success through a hard scrabble. I'm not going to say it's easier now. I just think that there's more opportunities to understand who's doing it well now.
That is a great point. And I was thinking back to like my granddad when he got out of the military back in the 40s. There was nothing, right? There was a handshake, have a good day, and that was that after many years of war. So it's an interesting thought process in terms of transitioning, and I'm wondering, Brian, I'm going to come to you with this, but when you left the Army and you switched to policing, or I can't remember which one came first, if it was policing or the Coast Guard, did you find that just the culture shock was the biggest one? That was one of the biggest ones for me, was coming out of the military and then dealing with like regular people all of a sudden. It was very challenging. What about yourself?
So you know, fortunately for me, the LAPD is a paramilitary organization, and everything there is very familiar. You know, we back in that time, we were a feeder ground from Camp Pendleton, Marine Corps base, about 90 minutes south of here, and so you know, it was a very familiar, comfortable environment. One of the transitions that I did, I took a year off and I went and I worked at the White House back in 2018-19. And that was the biggest culture shock for me, not being around people that wear the uniform, but are also there to serve. But that was, you just having to kind of like Lisa said, not, you can't talk about what, go run to the bathroom in the morning. You can't, the sense of humor is different. The sensitivities are different. And that was a bit of a shock, but everybody was still there to serve, just in a much different way. But yeah, so that was a tough transition. And then coming back to the LAPD after that was also, that was a tough transition as well. So.
No doubt. Now, I'm wondering, Lisa, yourself, because you went from Reg Force to Reserve. Now, here in Canada, I don't know if it's different down in the States. Reservists are required, I think, to muster once a week and then go on a field X every, I think it's once or twice a year, something like that. Is it about the same for yourself, or how big of a transition was that?
So my transition was even worse because I actually left active service overseas where we had to live on base in barracks. So it was an unaccompanied tour. Spouses weren't allowed. So your best buddies were literally the only people you could be with. So your unit was your whole family. And I transitioned from there. I got completely out, like 100% out. When I got into the reserves, it was a 5-year gap. And so I got back in. I had to actually duck walk and go to MEPS, which is our the physical place they go to, and they make sure you haven't done drugs in the last 48 hours, and you can duck walk. Duck walking is, I have no idea why we have to do that at MEPS, but you have to squat walk through a hospital in a hospital gown, basically. Super important, not fun to do when you've been out of the military for a while and you're already 35 years old. So yeah, the transition was really, really hard for me because I left everything. But then for the reserve here in the US, it's usually 1 weekend a month, usually 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then 2 weeks out of the year, we do like a big exercise, sometimes overseas, sometimes stateside. But I didn't join the regular Army either when I joined the reserve. So I did a unique program called Special Access Program, which was non-uniform, had a very specific mission. And the problem was what I was missing in the military, I got when we got together, but because we were a special access program, we weren't allowed to really army it up in between our times physically together. So I never got that community back, which is the reason why I looked externally for veteran communities in Houston where I could find that support.
That's a great point in terms of seeking other veterans, because I think this is something that we here in Canada, at least, it's challenging. Our military is very small, and so when we get out of the military, we scatter to the wind, basically. So you have, the second largest landmass in the world, and we are there's only like 5 bases that you can go to, especially within the Army. It's pretty limited, and so we're coming from all over the place, and then we spend our time together, and then we disseminate back to the winds again, and you're not really around other people. Have you guys noticed that like when you were able to get around those people again, everything just like, oh, okay, back to normal kind of deal? Or was it was there another transitionary period between there, Lisa? What are you thinking?
Well, specifically what I'm thinking is my military friends, I get to be my whole self. And I say that because, when I went to basic, I had black, white, red, purple, pink. I had Mormon, Jewish, Muslim, like everybody gets thrown in one barracks and you have to figure out how to deal with each other. So because you're 24/7, you're tired. We had to cut our hair back then. You don't have to anymore. But so the women and the men had to cut their hair. You literally get stripped of who you are. There's no facades that you can put on. So your military friends get to know the whole you, and they accept you, and they take what they like, and they just tell you to shut up when the version of you that they don't like comes out. And so when I get around fellow military, whether it's I've started at my ripe old age of 46, understanding that I like to be the whole me. So I look the terminology in the States is Joe, G.I. Joe. I look very soldier. I look very Joe when I go to the airport sometimes. And it's because if you've got the duffel bag with the patches on it, somebody will sit down next to you. They'll talk about their service, and it's a huge letdown. And you're just like, okay. So if I curse and I talk about beauty products in the same sentence, people are totally okay with that because this is a comrade. So that's my humble opinion.
Absolutely. Brian, you look like you were totally agreeing in terms of beauty products and swearing. What do you think?
Right. No, but it is. There's a certain comfort in it, and I think even with military friends or friends in any uniform, you can go years without seeing them and pick right up where you left off. And I think that's something special, and it's a connection that crosses borders. We were talking about Big Jim, the Canadian RCMP officer. it doesn't matter what uniform we wear, but there's that commonality, there's that bond, and it's undeniable. It's an amazing thing that we all have.
Yeah, I love it. One of the benefits, especially a quick little story. My wife at one point called me a social butterfly, and I was like, "What? Me? Like I'm not. No, I don't really like people. I don't really like talking to people. Why have a podcast, right? The funny thing was, she was like, "No, no, no. If you see anybody with like a veteran plate on their car or a veteran patch or some sort of military, you're right there. Handshakes out, and you're like, hey man, how's it going? Blah blah. Just to kind of create, not just create that bond, but almost fill it up. It's like a drug for a little bit. But the question I have for you now is, I'm wondering, do you think that do you think that there was a way, if you look back 10, 20 years ago when you were in, do you think there was a way for you to ease that transition or to ease the, is there anything that you could have been doing during that period of time to assist you in that movement out of the uniform, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I'm doing it right now, getting myself ready to get out of uniform eventually, and for me, it's picking up projects that matter. One project that I have going is a agricultural project in South Sudan, and so I've been flying back and forth, trying to get this up and running with some friends of mine, and it's really been just an incredible thing, and I could see myself doing that for the rest of my life. So little projects like that, I think are assisting me and seeing that there is a life after uniform service that still involves serving.
I like that a lot. Lisa, what about yourself?
I don't know if I could follow up a agricultural project in South Sudan. I'm so not that impressive. But, Brian said it just now, and he said it when he answered the first question, and he talks about serving outside of uniform. And I think that's a really big deal for us. Those of us, and I'm generalizing veterans, of course, but those of us who have raised our right hand to serve, especially in the 2000s and the 21st century, is we did that because we wanted to be part of something bigger. We very few people have the join the army or go to jail option like that. That's long since faded away. If we raised our right hand, even if we weren't good while we were in uniform, at some point in time, we had that itch to serve. And I think one of the ways that service members as a whole can avoid losing that sense of community is to really continue that life of service, because we miss the community, but we also miss the way it makes us feel. Like being a soldier makes me proud. I am proud to say that I serve in the United States Army. And so when I finally take off the uniform for good, I need to be able to say that I serve in something else, whether it's community leadership boards. I'm probably not going to be doing South Sudan, but, serving in government positions, in non-government positions, volunteering for the PTA, just feeling like you're part of something bigger. That's what I'm going to need to do. And I'm already looking at ways I can be impactful in my local community, because me personally, when I see issues at the government level or any other higher headquarters where I have no impact, what I think is, our Texas government would be better if Texas counties were better. Texas counties would be better if Texas cities were better. Texas cities would be better if the school boards were better. So where can I start? I can start by volunteering with a school board or a community like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking for something, I know a guy who has a program in South Sudan that you could be involved in. Shaun, I'm coming to you. Do you got any thoughts on anything we've gone over so far? Let's see if he's got.
I'm going to give it a go. Currently, I'm dealing with almost standard issue Army communications network. This is so freaking bad right now. It's terrible. So I want to go back to what Brian had said, and that is synchronizing with the level of service that a person has. And so I think that's where a lot of errors occur, is when someone is transitioning out of the military. and they are looking to serve, they're not choosing the right level of service or the right group of people to serve with, or the synchronicity for them, not for the group, but for them entering into a group, choosing a wrong group, and then not being disillusioned, but being disappointed with their efforts to serve. I think it's super critical that you choose correctly when you're trying to further serve once you leave the service. And so that's where people who have been in the game a little while, like Lisa, like Brian, who can either through an organization or through wisdom, or point you towards someone else who has even more wisdom, that can help calibrate you into the right slot, the right entry slot, so that you're set up for more success. So I really think that initial synchronicity is critical to set someone up for a further lifetime of service.
I like that a lot. Brian, you got any thoughts on it?
No, that's absolutely right, and I think that one of the things we have in uniform is loyalty, and it's hard to break out of those groups, and it's hard to recognize when something's not right for you and it's time to jump out. But and I think that's when your friends and communication have to come in, where you talk with your friends about these things after you're done serving in the military, but you still have that strong network where you talk about what you're going through, and if your transition is heading in the right direction, and just be ready to adjust fire, to go out there, and if you need to change it. Don't head down something that's not going to make you happy.
Absolutely. Lisa?
Something Shaun had said made me think about how many veterans don't talk about being veterans. And I think that's another place where we're finding ourselves lonely. Is, a lot of us, we get hired, a lot of American companies, I'm not sure about Canadian, but a lot of American companies track how many veterans they have. It's considered an underrepresented class. And so if we're tracking veteran status, but then we get into the offices and we don't talk about that service. So then we go back to falling into this, hey, I look a certain way, I probably have certain requirements on behaviors, versus saying, hey, I'm a vet, this is experiences I've had, and bringing that to the table. And so I do believe that there's a big benefit to us being more open with the fact that we served, because I'm also seeing in the communities that I work in with regards to leadership development, I'm seeing this misnomer that veterans are somehow, we all have PTSD, we're all angry, we all drop the F-bomb every sentence, you can't leave us alone with your children, like we're some sort of aggressive personalities, when the truth is we're all shades, colors, personalities, alpha, betas, omegas. The military's got everything in it, and we really need to bring our veteran status, I think, to the table a little bit more frequently to feel accepted.
That is a great point. Now, I'm wondering if there's a way to maybe alleviate that transition, because I think especially in the last 20 some odd years, I mean, with Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and all of the places that are hotspots right now, but the I think the challenge being the fact that we were striving to be warfighters, and then warfighters aren't really, I wouldn't say useful, but they're not required for corporate lifestyles, if that makes sense, right? And even here in Canada, I had a few of my friends who got out of the military after going overseas and tried to enter into law enforcement, firefighting, things like that, and they were actually they weren't really accepted with open arms, if that makes sense. They were accepted through time, like they went through the process, but there was almost a, kind of keeping them at arm's length through that process, based off of that the stigma, the misnomer of, everyone, they're all crazy, they've done crazy things, that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering, Brian, did you see anything in terms of policing or law enforcement in where you have veterans coming in that didn't quite fit with the new program? What do you think?
Yeah, so I've seen that, but I think that especially in my current organization, there's so many veterans. There's lots of programs. We have a military liaison. Today is the Marine Corps birthday. As if you know anybody in the U.S. Marine Corps, you've already got to say happy birthday 5 or 6 times to them. but there's a big like cake cutting ceremony at police headquarters today, and so I would say for us that's not really the case. There's enough of us around where there's still a strong community, and there is that network. Now, as far as in the corporate role, I have a good friend named Frank Dunleavy, who's he's an investment banker, and he always hires somebody from the military, typically from the special operations community, to work in his investment banks, and it's generally to keep all of the kids there leveled and normal, so that when they start complaining about something, they have their military veteran there to say, "Listen, son, it's not that hard. You need to suck it up and move on. Let me tell you a story." And he says it keeps everybody working harder, and he loves having that energy in his offices. So kind of an interesting way to use veterans to further investment banking.
I think that's great. The only problem would be like the knife hands to these young kids they would be really heavy. Lisa, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I wanted to jump in right away and say I cannot tell you how many times I've said to people, "Hey, calm down. Literally nobody's shooting at us," and I get a bunch of blank stares. As a structure or as a civil engineer, like they just can't understand. I know, Brian, you couldn't use that in your field, but yeah. Just saying, hey, listen, nobody's shooting at us right now. Yeah.
That is one of the things. I mean, myself, I think I talked about this last time, Lisa, was it's like when I got back, I was like, I was expecting there to be IEDs everywhere and constantly like, there's a bag of garbage on the ground, and people would be like, yeah, there is. And I'm like, but then nobody had any idea what I was talking about. So it is quite a challenge. I got a comment here from Matt. I just want to put up. He said, after I left the CAF, the Canadian Armed Forces, there was a positive trauma bond with those that I served with. I agree that sitting down and swearing is something that still feels real to me. And you know what? There's a key to that. It's interestingly enough, at least with the collective itself, because we don't swear on the show, I don't swear as much outside the show now. Just because I've been doing this every day for so long, so I've actually, it's almost off-putting now when I hear it. But when I do have a bunch of military people in my life, oh, there's Shaun's back. When I do have a bunch of military people, the swears do come very quickly and very heavily, at least. So it's pretty good. Shaun, you may have missed that last section, but I'm gonna see if you have any thoughts on the previous section that you did hear. Anything at all?
We just got hit with a massive lightning thunderstorm, so I missed about the last 2 minutes. It was literally the epitome of a classic Army communication network. So it was all kinds of jankified. So sorry, I didn't hear it now, but I do want to go back to something that was thrown out there as a key word, and this is the war fighter term. And I think that it's quite a limiting term. I think that it limits veterans through the very term itself. And I believe that to be the case because not only is it the identity, it's the limiting identity. And so I know a lot of veterans who either classify themselves as or believe themselves as just a war fighter. But there's so much more, but they can't break out of the self-constrained model within their minds that that's all they are, but they're way more than that. And so I actually don't care for the term warfighter in these kind of conversations because it denotes almost that knuckle dragging, mouth breathing dummy who can only kill and not think, or etc. And I'm making a gross generalization, and I'm making it in a negative fashion to make my point that we have to be careful within our own communities of our own language. I think that as veterans, we have a lot more to offer than most veterans understand. And that's because within our own veteran communities, we limit ourselves through our language, through our discussions, and we never encourage our communities to strive for more than, I'm going to say it, just a warfighter. So the term itself is kind of a bummer to me, and I'd like to change that language.
Absolutely. I think that's a great one. Lisa, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm nodding hard over here, Shaun, if you can't see me. But I think one of the other things, so I work with a lot of people who are not necessarily transitioning recently, but I work with executives. And when I talk about veterans, or I talk specifically to veterans, um, my infantrymen and my tip of the spear guys struggle with communicating what they bring to the corporate fight, because all they hear or all they can communicate is, okay, what did I do? 3 days a week, I was doing glass house drills. I was doing this, I was doing that. What they don't understand is what they were doing. A glass house drill is not just room clearing, it is teamwork, it is communication, it is doing analysis at the highest level of risk and figuring out in seconds what your number one risk factor is, what your number two is, what your number three is, and how you and your stack of four bubbas is going to mitigate those risks. And if you can help them translate those warfighter skills into that and bring that to the workforce, talking about risk mitigation, talking about teamwork, talking about how you can uh, just literally tackle a mission, it breaks that down from being a warfighter task to really being a super effective corporate task. And then on the flip side, taking those of us who now, as a 12 alpha, so I'm a combat engineer, but some of our engineers are just combat service support, and they don't feel like warfighters, so they feel segregated by that terminology, and they don't feel confident saying that they're veterans, even though they spent God knows how many times in the sandbox and have received mortar attacks, have been on convoys, have been at risk. Getting them to do the opposite and be able to take their very normal skills that are required in day-to-day offices and help explain that extra level of risk that they naturally mitigated, but they don't even realize they were doing it. So that's my 2 cents there.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Brian, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, terminology is everything. It's one of those cultural pieces that can bring people together or separate them. And I think that we always need to choose those words that are inclusive of our brothers and sisters. You don't want to exclude somebody because they're a combat engineer. They're right there with everybody else. When I tell people I'm in the Coast Guard, it's the Coast Guard. But the Coast Guard does amazing things, and I've been able to be part of some of those things. But I wouldn't necessarily say that we're war fighters in the Coast Guard. That happens very rarely, and it's just a different type of service. But we're still veterans, and I get that question a lot too. Are you guys really a branch in the military? And and I've got coasties that have been wounded. I've got coasties that were on ground convoys through Iraq, but they're not they're not really considered war fighters. So it is a term that I agree with Shaun and Lisa. It's we're all veterans, and it's all part of service and not necessarily war fighting, especially now that the wars are kind of dialed down. We're not necessarily doing that right now.
Absolutely. Actually, this brings up an interesting point in terms of there's a lot of derision between the between the different trades, between the different elements, between all the different services, and I'm wondering if you guys think it bleeds out, right? Like once you're out, and there's you got a bunch of Army guys, and we'll talk smack about the Navy guys, and the Navy guys will talk smack about the Air Force, and everybody kind of talks smack about the Coast Guard. But the the funny point of that is that I think sometimes it applies itself to how we feel about ourselves afterwards, right? In terms of you're saying that engineers or coasties, or I know lots of medics who consider themselves who've been doing the job for many years, that don't consider themselves veterans because they didn't go to Afghanistan, or they didn't go to here, or they weren't in that spot with that thing. And so I'm wondering, do you think, is it just the language, or do you think that perhaps it is the culture itself within the military that creates those separations, and then we kind of lay on them, if that makes any sense? Lisa, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, I'm a horrible person to ask this question to, because Army Navy's coming up in a couple weeks, and from here until the first weekend of December, Navy is Department of Transportation, as far as I'm concerned. So, like, there is no love between the branches, but the rest of the time, I mean, so what I'm doing right now, I'm actually on a five city and state tour doing speeches for Veterans Day and working with the veterans community. And, you know, while I'm talking, I always make some jokes about Army, Navy, Marine Corps, of course, Marines eating crayons, especially they celebrate their birthday for a week. You've been talking about that. But I do have to say, Brian, that the Coast Guard is no longer the butt of most jokes now that we have the Space Force. I mean, space cadets are just too easy to pick on. I say that to say when we're all gathered together, we definitely segregate. Just like this morning at breakfast, I ended up meeting a group of people, and 3 of us were Army, and there was 1 Marine, and we literally pushed him out of the conversation. But when you don't gather together with your groups, because everybody likes to be around people who are like-minded, right? And there is a mentality, especially to our Marines, that they should probably go and sit in a corner by themselves. But when that doesn't exist, like I was saying earlier, I'm in the airport a lot. And if I see somebody wearing their issued boots, I'm like, hey, they're usually E4 or below. Their boots are too heavy to put in their carry-on, or their bag was overweight. And so you end up talking to them, and it doesn't matter what branch of service they are. You want to bring them into the fold. So I actually think I would feel worse if there wasn't that constant ribbing.
That's an interesting point. Brian, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, so I was talking with a bunch of my cops the other day, and I think it's a statement that rings true here, and it's kind of a rare confluence of miraculousness that allows somebody the ability to serve in uniform. It's you have to be almost physically perfect. You have to be fit. You have to have integrity. You have to your moral standards are at the highest level of our country, and you have to have that drive that pulls you out of your mom's basement to be able to come out there and get with people you don't know and serve your country. And so, and it doesn't matter what uniform you wear when you do it. The fact that you're able to do it is amazing. And so everybody that puts on that uniform and is able to go out there and serve, it doesn't matter what uniform that is. It's an honor, and it should be treated as such.
I like that a lot. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I do. So just a few minutes ago, I was on my laptop, got smoked with a big tropical storm, shut down that grid, and in about 60 seconds, I rapidly switched to my cell phone, which is what I'm on now, switched mics, and tried to pretend that everything was business as usual. And so that's the thing that we all can do. But we never talk about it. We treat them as if these are norms, but they're not norms out there. And so I think that one of our jobs I don't want to use the term leaders within our industries, but one of our jobs as perhaps mentors is to demonstrate how many skill sets we have that were driven into us, or were taught to us, or were encouraged in us, or were absorbed through osmosis. Whatever the case is, we all have inherent abilities to shift on a dime and execute against the task, where it is the motto, we will find a way. And so I think one of the things that we should be doing is more frequently talking about how competent and capable we are within the larger world around us, to demonstrate to other veterans that they too can easily do what I'm doing, what we're all doing. And I think that if there was more of that occurring, rather than more talk about war fighting, I think we, veterans as a whole, would be seen as more complete human beings with skill sets that can be brought to bear to add that extra to the ordinary. And so I truly believe that I've got a boatload of buddies who are extraordinary. And it's not that they were born that way. They are that through a process.
And I think that most of them don't understand what they can bring to bear, either in the corporate world or in various industries, or any task that is put in front of them. I think they can smash it out of the park, but they don't believe that they can because they don't hear it enough from people like us. And so I've kind of taken it on as a tertiary mission to some degree, where as part of the collective, or walking down a sidewalk, anywhere in between those two positions, if I see someone who, and I'm not going to say struggling, but if I see someone who isn't believing in themselves enough, then I'm trying to figure out a way to make them believe in themselves some more, so that they can go on and start expanding this footprint of veterans can kick ass, but we just don't say it the right way. We don't demonstrate it the right way. And I do believe it's one of our jobs.
This is an interesting point. I'm going to come to you, Lisa, in a second here. You're like silent out to the mic. I had a friend of mine who was getting out of the military, and I asked him, I was like, so what are you going to do? And he's like, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of call for machine gunners. And I was like, well, yeah, but okay, what's your plan? He's like, I don't know. I don't really have any skill sets other than being able to shoot and blow things up and da-da-da. I'm like, break those tasks down. What do you need to do in order to do all these things? And then once he actually took the time to break down what it takes to be a machine gunner, then he started going, oh, well, I can utilize this. Oh, I have, timings, and I can be depended upon, and I can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I love that point, Shaun. I think it's absolutely correct. We just don't, I don't think it gets maybe explained within the military enough that these are skill sets outside the military as well. Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to peel the onion on what Shaun was saying, because yesterday at Johnson & Johnson, the theme of their Veterans Day event was leading change through innovation. And so my corporate ears were on while Shaun was talking, and I was thinking of all the innovation that comes from, like you were saying, a machine gunner who understands that he knows synchronization, and he knows timing, and he knows how to adjust quickly in stressful situations. All those things lead to being innovative. And I think one of the other things, on top of that veterans can do, and we don't often do it outside of the military environment, is we self-police a lot. So when you're looking at these entrepreneur and solopreneur companies, which I didn't know that was a word, I learned that this week, but you look at these new organizations that are starting out and need innovation just to get their foot in the door, or older companies like Johnson & Johnson that need innovation to stay relevant, it's the military that can think outside of the box, but it's also the military to military communications, where it is so easy for me, if I knew Brian and I saw him, if I knew nothing more than he was military and I saw him on the street and I saw something he was doing that was messed up, it is so easy for me to go to another soldier and go, hey, brother. And it always starts with, hey, brother, you're jacked up. Go ahead and fix this. And there's no animosity. And our corporate American people who have only grown up in corporate America haven't necessarily grown up with that immediate correction mentality. But God, I see it in businesses. And when people utilize their veterans properly, those changes can go faster than the times. Changing with the times is one thing. Innovation is changing faster than the times. So just to kind of dovetail on what Shaun was saying there.
Absolutely. Brian, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Lisa's spot on. There's nothing that's absolutely true, and I do it all the time too. If I have a fellow veteran that's not doing something right, it is the knife hand, and it comes out. So it's effective, and it would be nice if the rest of our the rest of our society could handle the knife hand, because everything would be a lot smoother.
I mean, it could be. I don't know if you guys ever saw this. There was a commercial from a long time ago where they brought I think it was a football linebacker into the offices, right? And it was just like, this person isn't being productive. What are you doing and just like smashes people by the water cooler. And so it's like, I don't know how effective that would be with a military service or having veterans come out with old school Sergeant Major style direction. I don't know if that would be as effective. Now, So the question I have also is, the life outside of the military when you're still in the military? We've talked a lot about the transition and getting out, but do you think there's anything that you guys could have done while you were in to preset yourself for success when you got out? So, and I'm gonna put this out there, is the fact that jujitsu for me was a big one once I got out, and it was super helpful, and I've been able to move forward in my own path of healing or getting better, or doing all the things that I want to do. Jiu-jitsu has been a big helpful piece to that. Helpful piece to that. Had I gotten that while I was in the military, had I started that while I was in, I think that would have helped me even more. Is there anything that you guys either did do or have done now that you wish you would have started while you were in to alleviate some of that transitionary period? Brian, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Yeah, so a couple things. One of the things that we're doing at the LAPD is we allow the military to have their skill bridge folks come in. This is when people are they're about 6 months from getting out, and we allow them to do a 6-month internship with the department where they come in and see if that's something that they want to do. And the other thing, I think it's just to start wrapping your head around the fact that you're not going to be serving and building those friendships that are outside of service. So I make a pretty conscious effort to have friends that aren't cops or aren't in the military, and it really keeps me connected to the outside world. Otherwise, it's it's just a bunch of F-bombs and whiskey. But it's still like that with civilians too. It's and it can be like that, and they so I think that's helpful for me, and I think the skill bridge thing has been really helpful for those active military people that are transitioning. It makes that transition very easy for them, and it gets us as an organization and an opportunity to look at people, test them out, and see if this is a person that we want in the uniform of the LAPD.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, you got any thoughts?
I failed 100% on this mission. To this day, I have one civilian friend from my time in service as a West Point grad. And then my first duty station was Fort Stewart outside of Savannah, Georgia. And we all got apartments right next door to each other, above and below and around each other, so that we basically brought the barracks to Savannah. And we had our one civilian friend that we picked up at the pool. Like, we're like, oh, we don't know you. We'll bring you into the fold. And to this day, she still calls herself our civilian friend. It's been 23 years. And so I did horribly on that. And I didn't understand how militant my life really was, how the terminology was, how gender relations, when you're in an organization where it is a meritocracy, I still struggle. I'm working with a energy company that's trying to build up the diversity not for diversity's sake. We've talked about this last time I was on the show, where I don't believe that visual diversity matters at all. I really believe that cognitive diversity matters. And so we're trying to build out diversity from the cognitive viewpoint. But I don't comprehend I struggle with the idea that, well, because I had to take time off for pregnancy, I couldn't get promoted with my peers. Well, that makes no sense to me, because in the military, you take time off on pregnancy and then you get back to work, period, hard stop. So I will say, I don't think I'm answering the question at all, but I would say I failed miserably. So I guess the question was, what could I have done? And that was maybe go out and hang out with non-military folks. So if we're going to go out on a Friday night, maybe the Joe Bar where everybody's doing whiskey shots, maybe walk away and talk to the women that were there, in my case, for something other than trying to get them to come back and hang out with my military guy friends. I was the fishing lure. It was my job to get the table of women to come hang out with my table of guys. So, I won't go any deeper in that, but we were all in our 20s once. I failed miserably on getting something. I think jiu-jitsu would have been a great way to do it. But I also have a military husband, so my poor kids speak more acronyms than most high schoolers have ever even heard. So I'm probably still failing there.
Absolutely. It's kind of hilarious. One of my wife and I first started dating, I was still in the military, and all of my military friends would come over to the house, and we would hang out, and we'd have parties, and the acronyms you don't even think about. That are just talking about work stuff, right? And all of that language, and she just sat there for the first time, like, I don't know what any of you guys are talking about. And I was like, oh, well, ask questions. We'll explain it if there's something that you don't understand. And within, I'd say, a couple of weeks, she was slinging acronyms just like everybody else. Shaun, you got any thoughts on how perhaps yourself you could have done better when you first got out?
Well, I think was the question how to help people who are currently serving transition out. So I think that if that's the question, then what I think is a poor way to do it is have someone who's currently in the system, who's already terrible within the system, break out another slideshow, PowerPoint presentation on how to do things just like the system. It doesn't work. I mean, you've got to bring in people who are out of the box thinkers, who have had careers outside of the military. I'm looking at Lisa, and I'm thinking, hire Lisa to transition everyone out of the military in an effective way. And here's why. Because she's well-rounded within the system, and then she got well-rounded outside of the system. And she can bridge the two. There is no serving officer that I've ever met who can deliver a PowerPoint presentation on how to transition out of the system if they've never been out of the freaking system. It's academic. It's a theoretical conversation through a PowerPoint click. And I know this to be true. Every single troop in that presentation is nodding off about 10 minutes into it. And not only is there a disappointment in the air, it's a backslide, because the next time someone steps up with a PowerPoint presentation, the groundwork is already being laid as to, oh yeah, here we go again, another waste of time. What I think to transition someone out to be successful, not just to get them out, but to successfully get them out, you've got to have someone who delivers experience outside of the wire, we'll call it. You've got to be able to come back into the system with some game. You can't have game within the game if you haven't been outside of the game. And so Lisa, again, is a perfect example of that. So how could it be done? Well, hire someone who isn't clicking the PowerPoint presentation from within the system.
100%. Brian, you got any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that, any type of encouragement to have those people that are transitioning to go actually experience what it is outside and prepare them for it. We just, we know about suicide rates, people getting out. I see it with the pension system. We had 4 LA County Sheriff's deputies that just committed suicide in the past 48 hours. I believe that one of them was retired, and it's that transition where there's stress because there's no sense of community anymore, and those things are tough. And so preparing people for that difficulty that's about to occur is I think paramount. And it's not an impossible task. I mean, millions of people transition out very successfully, and modeling that transition I think is important. I think Lisa, like Shaun said, Lisa's a prime example. So Lisa, I think you need to expand that campaign.
Will do, Brian. One of the things I'm going to just jump in here, and one of the things I see a lot is when we leave active service, we often go into a military-specific organization. I'm sure it's the same in Canada. How many guys leave the military and start a coffee or a t-shirt company, right? And they hang out with all of their military buddies. Jiu-jitsu has a similar mentality, but it's not just former military. And so we need to find those organizations for your first job where you aren't army to army or military to military, where you have to learn the non-military acronyms. The transition for me into Shell Oil Company it was brutal because they have their own mentality, it's a Dutch company. So, websites with guns was actually blocked. And I thought, okay, I can't even check my military email at work because even during a break, because it's blocked by the firewall. So I had to completely flip my script, but I can't imagine just postponing that transition by joining an organization that's all military. And I'm not saying those organizations are bad, but they don't give you most of the time. They don't give you the coping skills, and coping skills is a dramatic word to say it, or a dramatic way to say it. But going military to military civilian organization doesn't give you the coping skills, the terminology, or even the network to allow you to grow outside the military. And again, you also don't realize to go back to what Shaun was saying earlier, how awesome it is to be a veteran. Your innovation, your creativity, like I was saying, your ability to self-police, all of that stuff doesn't come out unless you get away from your comfort zone. So I guess the underlying message of transitioning is getting into the military, going overseas, maybe not even being deployed, but having those rough nights, going to basic training, going to advanced training schools. All of those were constant steps of getting outside of your comfort zone. And if we push to our military veterans, hey, we've got one more time, I need you to really turn yourself into an Instagram meme and remember that life starts outside of your comfort zone. And we rip that Band-Aid off when they're still young and pliable versus when my dad did it. Something my dad did, he went from Vietnam, 100% disabled, Silver Star recipient, 4 Purple Hearts. I mean, he had an insane resume. Well, what did he do? He went straight to being a doctor in the VA. Well, he never transitioned out of the military, and that was really hard for a man who had severe PTSD. Everybody else had PTSD. So it's good because the people are empathetic, but it's also bad because it took him longer to get all the coping skills he needed to be able to communicate with his 8 children and have that civilian side of his life. So that probably sounded like rambling, but get outside your comfort zone earlier rather than later.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it's absolutely accurate in terms of needing to step out of that. Shaun, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, so real quick, I think what we're talking about is three-dimensionality. Within the military, you can be three-dimensional within the military, but the moment that you step out of the military, you're one-dimensional until you start realizing that you have three-dimensional skills that you have to start applying into your one-dimensional life and start building out a new life. You're building out a new construct. And so as you become more three-dimensional in the big world, it's now your responsibility to explain that to people who are in the one-dimensional world back in the military. I mean, it's a crazy thing to think about, but some of the most competent people I've ever worked with in the military are still one-dimensional because they haven't flourished within we'll call it the civilian world or the larger world wrapped around them, because they don't either have the self-belief or they haven't expanded their footprint out into the big world through the skills that they already have and become three-dimensional. And so, again, I think a person like Lisa stepping into various organizations who are extremely competent at what they do, bringing her three-dimensionality into these organizations helps illustrate what veterans are capable of. I see it as a self-fulfilling prophecy of success by having the right people who are three-dimensional delivering excellence back into organizations that desperately need to see great veterans doing great things so that they can then start building on that belief that veterans really can be helpful for any organization. So, again, to paraphrase, start working on your three-dimensionality out in the world.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I have one quick question for you guys, and then we'll do some final thoughts here. But I'm wondering, within the military itself, and I imagine in most militaries in general, you're kind of taken care of pretty heavily, actually. And when you're in, if you're living in the barracks, you don't have to worry about where your food is. You don't have to worry about your rent. You don't have to worry about electrical or any of the bills or any like medical, anything, right? You show up to work. you're there, you do your PT, you do whatever, you do your job, and then you go back to the barracks, and you don't have to worry about this. And I think one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of veterans is they struggle with those basic skill sets moving on. And I'm wondering, do you think, is there anything that we can do now that we're out to assist those once they do get out, once they are moving on from life, from our own experience, to ease that transition? Brian, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Ooh, yeah, that's a hard one. It's just about being an adult, right? So I look at the kids that are coming on the LAPD now, and a lot of them still live with their moms, and they really haven't grown up, and so I don't think it's a military specific problem. I think it's a generation problem that we're experiencing right now. It's, I know that down here housing costs are prohibitive for anybody to move out of mom's house, but it's the same with the military. When you transition out, you don't have somebody taking care of you every second. And again, it's just coaching, training, teaching. I know that what we do is we sit them down, we help them, we help them find an apartment. We help them with financial planning. We have different courses that we offer on how to save your money and what to do to make sure that you're comfortable. It's a big thing for a cop, because you want a cop to be financially comfortable. It's a good strategy for to stave off corruption, things like that. So it takes a lot of effort, right? Because you got to be a dad, and you got to be a dad to a lot of different kids. So that would be my best advice as somebody who's senior in an organization, who sees people coming in from the military or even from the outside. You take those people under your wing, and you really focus on mentorship and getting them to a place where they're going to be successful.
Absolutely. Lisa, any thoughts?
Yeah, Brian had a lot of really great nuggets there, and what I heard was leadership, and parenting is leadership. So if you're a active parent, I'm not going to say a good parent, but if you're an active parent, you already have those leadership skills. And in the military, you have young second lieutenants with an old crusty NCO usually. In my case, I remember I'm still friends with my old first sergeants when I was company commander. But yeah, you had these young soldiers who didn't know how to balance their budget because they didn't have to. When they got their paycheck, they knew they had room and board. They knew if they messed up that the Army was going to buy them new stuff. So they got the stupid expensive car. They got the payday loans. They got the latest iPhone, while I had a flip phone and I was driving my mom's old Ford Taurus from the late 70s. So they didn't learn those financial advising classes, but we did what we always do in the military. And Shaun alluded to it. He didn't allude to it. Shaun outlined it earlier. We gave him a PowerPoint about finances and budgeting. And so I think the real answer is simple, but it is hella not easy. And that is, we have to go back to reminding our military leaders that they're not like corporate America leaders. They're not getting people who went to college and had to take basic economics classes just to graduate. Sometimes you got guys with GEDs and they're great at the Warf Fighter functions, but nobody ever sat down and taught them even what a checkbook is, because they have a debit card. So teaching them how to balance a checkbook, teaching them, hey, listen, you get promoted from E3 to E4, take that extra $200 a month and just put it in a bank account and forget about it. Do it automatically. So I think what we're talking about here is really having, pushing active leadership. And I think where we are specifically in our military, where we're having retention issues, we're having recruiting issues, that, and we're, God willing, we're not starting ourselves off in any new wars anytime soon, that our leaders need to focus on the whole person, because Gen Z is not the same as Gen X. And we need to treat them differently. We need to treat them as people who aren't moving out of their parents' houses as early, and they don't want to. And that's not bad. It's just we as leaders have to adjust fire according to who we're raising and who we're leading.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we are a little bit over time. Shaun, you got any points on this before we do some final thoughts?
I do, because this subject has come up in the past several times, and whenever it comes up, I almost want to laugh out loud because it's kind of laughable. And I know that's going to sound a bit mean-spirited. The two guests have said exactly what I would like to say in respect to leadership. These are things that have to be taught, and etc. But any veteran who's 30 years old or 40 years old and sitting on their couch wondering how to make a peanut butter sandwich, well, guess what? You're just a really old kid. Grow up. Just like every other person has to grow up outside of the service. I mean, if you don't know how to buy groceries, guess what? There's 18-year-olds who are in, just getting out of high school right now who don't know how to make sandwiches, but they freaking figure it out. And they don't have your skills. I see it as a bit of a nanny state to some degree. And relying on the fact that, well, nobody ever taught me how to do banking, that doesn't fly with me. Learn. Because there's 18-year-old kids who never served, who had to learn because no one was holding their hand through a military process. So that the idea that someone had their laundry washed and folded for them throughout their military service, and then when they get out, now they're shrugging their shoulders and waiting. They only wear dirty clothes. Come on, grow up. And that's all I have to say on that. Maybe it's too hard of a line, but I do not accept that life is tough for veterans because they were so looked after, and then when they get out the following day, they're not going to take responsibility to address the things that they need to address. I just won't accept it. So that is my stance.
I bring this up every once in a while just so that I can rile Shaun up a little bit, because every time I do, he's just like, oh, it's fantastic. So we are a little bit over time. Let's get some final thoughts on anything that we've gone over today. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you guys so much. Brian, Lisa, been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed this a lot. There's lots of really great nuggets of knowledge and wisdom in here. So Brian, any final thoughts? Anything at all? Over what
thanks for having me on, Chance. Just want to say it's nice to talk with other veterans. I think that when you look at transitioning in service, that's the key is you talk about what's going on. You build those friendships, you build those relationships, and that'll make for a better whole person, and you'll live longer and be happier. And so I think that's key for everybody as they transition out.
Absolutely. Lisa, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to steal something. I think the biggest lesson learned I got today was from Brian. And if you have a way, by the way, for this, if it's a 501(c) or whatever for the South Sudan thing, I think you need to plug that because it's very cool. But my takeaway from this discussion is that we really need to find, as we're transitioning out and before we transition out, a way to continue to serve so we don't have that hole. And it'll sound very cheesy, but we don't have that hole in our heart. We don't have that hole in our life that our service to, whether it's the city, the community, the government, or even just your guys to your left and your right. So that's my big takeaway is for my friends who are transitioning now that we're at our 20+ year mark, my commissioning group, really find a sense of service outside the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, any final thoughts?
I think that the biggest thing that struck me was very early in the conversation when we were talking about synchronizing to the correct thing once you are transitioning out. Just if you don't know where to slot yourself into, start looking around for people who are already slotted and can give you some advice. You really need to not be careful, but you need to be sensible in your post-service trajectory by easing your way in, setting yourself up for success through wise guidance of others who've already been successful in it. I think it's really critical, not just for yourselves, but also so that you can demonstrate to the larger community around you that everyone can be successful in this. Everyone can be successful. And I would love to see more success stories rather than broken trajectory time and time again. So please, anyone who's listening to this, reach out to someone who's been in the game of multiple careers and has made multiple failures perhaps, but has learned the lessons that they need to learn to impart on you in a minute, in 90 seconds. That's all it takes. Some quick guidance to get you headed in the right starting direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to say that, you know, it behooves the nation to churn out good veterans. And it does, you know, like the nation benefits by having solid, effective veterans of military, police, fight, like all of the service industries, re-entering into the rest of the world. But I have a little addendum to that, which is it behooves you to expand your own mindset, expand your skill set, expand your friends group. It makes you a more full person. And as Shaun said earlier, it makes you three-dimensional rather than one-dimensional. So learn, learn more every day, build upon that knowledge, and then grow into the person that you're meant to be. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.